I'm Allison, 34, and last Saturday at my nephew Tyler's birthday party, my world imploded. My sister Stephanie handed me cake with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Buying stuff doesn't make you special. You're just the family wallet. Her husband Greg laughed while my mom Barbara muttered, "Let it go." In that moment, I remembered covering their mortgage, emergencies, and Tyler's $12,000 tuition payment just last week. So I set down that cake, grabbed the tuition envelope, and changed everything. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever reached your breaking point with family. Trust me, what happened next changed my life forever. Growing up in Elmhurst, a middle-class suburb of Chicago, Stephanie and I were inseparable despite our 3-year age gap. We shared a bedroom with twin beds adorned with matching floral comforters, whispered secrets long after our parents thought we were asleep, and defended each other fiercely at school. Our father worked as an accountant while our mother taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. We weren't wealthy, but we never went without necessities. Everything changed when I turned 16. The arguments between our parents grew louder, more frequent. Dad started staying late at the office, and Mom's smile appeared less often. When they finally sat us down to announce their divorce, Stephanie, then 19, stormed out of the house. I stayed, watching my mother cry as she explained that Dad had been having an affair with his administrative assistant. Financial stability vanished overnight. Dad moved out and his child support payments were inconsistent at best. Mom picked up extra tutoring jobs, but with the mortgage and bills piling up, we had to downsize to a small apartment. I took a job at the local grocery store, working evenings and weekends while maintaining my grades. Stephanie, who had been attending community college, dropped out, saying she couldn't focus on school with everything happening. When I graduated high school, I had saved enough for my first semester at University of Illinois, majoring in computer science. Those college years were brutal. I juggled 3 part-time jobs while carrying a full course load. Many nights I survived on vending machine snacks, too exhausted to even microwave ramen. While I was pulling all-nighters coding and studying, Stephanie met Greg at a bar where she waitressed. 6 months later, at 20, she married him. Mom and I scraped together enough for a modest reception at a local community center. After graduating with honors, I landed an entry-level position at a software company in Boston. The starting salary felt like a fortune after years of scraping by. I shared a tiny apartment with 2 roommates, saved aggressively, and continued building my skills. Within 3 years, I had been promoted twice. By 28, I was a senior engineer at TechFusion, one of the most prestigious firms in the industry. That's when the calls from Stephanie started coming more frequently. The first request seemed reasonable. Her car needed repairs, and she was short $600. Just until payday, she promised. I transferred the money immediately, happy to help and expecting repayment. Payday came and went without mention of the loan. When I gently reminded her 2 months later, she sounded offended. "Are you seriously counting pennies with your own sister?" Greg had steady work as a contractor, but there always seemed to be gaps between jobs. Their finances were perpetually in disarray. When Tyler was born 7 years ago, I flew home with a suitcase full of baby clothes and a check to cover Stephanie's unpaid maternity leave. I set up a college fund for my nephew with a $5,000 initial deposit. The pattern established itself so gradually I barely noticed. Every few months, a crisis emerged. Greg's truck broke down, $1,200, their refrigerator died, $950, unexpected medical bills, $3,400. Each time, I transferred funds without question. For Tyler's 5th birthday, they mentioned struggling to afford the party he wanted. I sent $800 for decorations and cake, only to arrive and find they'd spent nearly $2,000 on an elaborate superhero-themed extravaganza. 2 years ago, they called about putting a down payment on a house. The rental market is awful, Stephanie explained. Tyler needs stability and a yard to play in. I contributed $20,000 toward their down payment, telling myself it was an investment in my nephew's well-being. 6 months after they moved in, their roof developed a leak. Another $5,400 from my savings. 3 months after that, Greg's contracting work slowed down during winter. I covered 2 months of their mortgage payments, totaling $3,800. The most significant request came just 3 months ago. Stephanie called, unusually subdued. Tyler's struggling in public school, she explained. The classes are overcrowded, and his teacher says he's not being challenged enough. She and Greg had found a private school with smaller classes and an advanced curriculum. The tuition, $24,000 per year. I agreed to pay for the first semester to see how it goes. Just last week, Stephanie had called in a panic. The school needed the second semester payment immediately or Tyler would lose his spot. I transferred $12,000 that same day. Through all of this, my resentment grew alongside my bank account's depletion. I never explicitly set boundaries, telling myself that family helps family. I justified each payment by focusing on Tyler, who had become the bright spot in my increasingly strained relationship with his parents. During video calls, he would excitedly show me his artwork or tell me about books he was reading. Those moments felt worth every penny. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered. At family gatherings, I noticed Stephanie's subtle digs about my single status or how lucky I was to have such a high-paying job, as if my years of hard work and sacrifice were merely good fortune. Greg rarely thanked me directly, instead making jokes about my fancy Boston lifestyle while benefiting from it enormously. My mother, who had remarried and moved to Florida, occasionally expressed concern about the financial dynamic. "You're too generous, Allison," she'd say during our weekly calls. But when I hinted at establishing limits, she would quickly add, "But they're family, and Tyler is your only nephew." This contradiction kept me locked in my role as reluctant benefactor, torn between setting healthy boundaries and maintaining family harmony. By the time Tyler's 10th birthday approached, I had covered over $90,000 in expenses for my sister's family over 7 years, none of which had ever been repaid. I arrived at Stephanie and Greg's suburban home clutching a carefully wrapped package, a telescope I knew Tyler had been coveting, along with a star chart and astronomy books. At 34, living alone in my Boston apartment, I'd spent hours researching the perfect model for a curious 10-year-old. Not too complicated, but not a toy either. Something he could grow with. The house looked different from my last visit 3 months ago. Fresh paint covered the exterior, and professional landscaping had replaced their previously patchy lawn. A new patio set gleamed on their expanded deck, improvements I hadn't heard about but had indirectly funded through my financial support. Balloons in blue and silver, Tyler's favorite colors, bobbed against the cloudless May sky. A bounce house dominated the backyard, where a professional photographer was setting up equipment near an elaborate cake table. The setup screamed expensive in a way that tightened the knot that had lived in my stomach for years. "Allison." Stephanie's voice rang out as I stepped through the front door. My sister, 3 years older at 37, looked refreshed in a new sundress, her highlighted hair styled in beachy waves. "You made it. Come in, come in." Her hug felt genuine, but I couldn't help noticing the gleaming hardwood floors that had replaced their worn carpet. The furniture was new too, a sectional sofa I didn't recognize and a coffee table that looked straight out of a designer catalog. "Place looks great," I said, fighting to keep my tone neutral. "We finally got around to those updates we've been wanting forever," Stephanie said, waving dismissively. "Greg's cousin works at a furniture store and gave us an amazing deal." I nodded, not mentioning that any amazing deal had been made possible by my covering their essential bills. My eyes caught a framed photo of Tyler in his private school uniform, standing proudly beside his new desk. The uniform alone had cost nearly $400, another expense I'd covered without complaint. Aunt Margaret, our father's sister, cornered me by the appetizer table. "Your sister's done wonders with this place," she said, gesturing with her wine glass. "Though between us, I'm surprised they can afford all this on Greg's irregular work schedule. Construction is so unpredictable." I smiled tightly. "They're managing." The words tasted bitter. More relatives arrived, cousins with children Tyler's age, Greg's boisterous family, neighbors, and school friends. I stood at the periphery, watching Stephanie work the room like a seasoned hostess. When she introduced Tyler's teacher from his private school, she didn't mention who was paying the tuition that made that relationship possible. "Look who's here," Stephanie announced as our mother Barbara arrived with her husband Frank. At 65, Mom looked tanned and rested from her Florida lifestyle. She hugged me warmly, whispering, "You look tired, sweetie," in that way mothers do. "Work's been busy," I replied, not mentioning the overtime I'd been putting in to rebuild my savings after the latest tuition payment. "Aunt Allison." Tyler's voice cut through my thoughts as he barreled into me with the full force of his 10-year-old enthusiasm. "You came. Wouldn't miss it, buddy." My genuine smile emerged for the first time that day. "Did you bring me something cool?" His eyes gleamed with anticipation. Before I could answer, Stephanie appeared beside us. "Tyler, that's not polite." "It's okay," I said, ruffling his hair. "And yes, I think you'll like it." When gift opening time arrived, Tyler tore through packages of video games, sports equipment, and clothing with the efficiency of a child who has been the center of attention his whole life. When he reached my package, I sat forward slightly. The telescope emerged from its wrapping, gleaming black and silver in the afternoon light. Tyler's eyes widened as he realized what it was. "Whoa! A real telescope." He immediately began examining the dials and lenses. "There are books in there too," I said. "Star charts. We could go stargazing sometime." "Cool," Tyler exclaimed, already reaching for the next gift. Stephanie glanced at the telescope with a tight smile. "That's nice. Though we don't really have space for more big stuff in his room with all the new furniture." Turning to the assembled guests, she added loudly, "My sister always goes overboard with the expensive gifts." Several guests chuckled. Someone muttered, "Must be nice having a rich sister." I felt my face flush. The telescope had cost less than a third of what they'd spent on this party, a party I was certain they couldn't afford without my financial cushion. As the gift opening concluded, I retreated to the kitchen for a moment of quiet. My mother followed me in, her expression concerned. "You seem upset," she said, leaning against the counter. "Everything okay? Do you think it's normal?" I asked abruptly. "The way they depend on me financially?" Mom sighed, glancing toward the door to ensure we weren't overheard. "Your sister has always been less practical about money, but she's giving Tyler a wonderful life." "No," I corrected. "I'm giving Tyler a wonderful life." "They're taking credit." "Allison," Mom said, her tone shifting to the one she'd used when we were children squabbling over toys. "They're family. Tyler is your nephew. Let's not create drama on his birthday." "It's not about the money itself," I tried explaining. "It's about the complete lack of acknowledgement. The entitlement. Last week's tuition payment wasn't even followed by a thank you." Mom patted my arm. "That's just how Stephanie is. You know she appreciates you, even if she doesn't say it." Then, lowering her voice, she added, "Just let it go for today. For Tyler's sake." Before I could respond, Stephanie burst into the kitchen. "There you are. It's cake time." Her eyes narrowed slightly at our private conversation. "Everything okay in here?" "Just catching up," Mom said smoothly. "Coming now." As we followed Stephanie back to the crowded living room, I recalled her frantic call just last week about the tuition payment. "It's due tomorrow, Allie. They'll give his spot to another kid if we don't pay." There had been real fear in her voice then, fear that their carefully constructed facade of financial stability would crumble. I had transferred the money immediately, as I always did. And as always, the gratitude lasted only as long as the crisis. The birthday cake was a marvel of professional confectionery, 3 tiers of blue fondant decorated with silver stars and planets to match Tyler's space obsession. Another expense I hadn't been told about but suspected I was indirectly funding. Everyone gathered around the dining table as Stephanie lit all 10 candles with flourish. Tyler stood beaming at the head of the table, his paper crown slightly askew. Smartphones rose in unison to capture the moment. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Stephanie encouraged as Tyler took a deep breath. After the candles were blown out to applause and cheers, Stephanie began cutting perfect slices. Greg stood beside her, playing the proud father, his arm draped casually around her waist. They looked like the perfect family, successful, happy, thriving. Stephanie handed me a slice on a paper plate decorated with rocket ships. "Here you go, sis," she said, and then added loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Buying stuff doesn't make you special. You're just the family wallet." Her tone was light, as if she were making a harmless joke between sisters. But the words landed like a physical blow. Greg laughed, that booming laugh that had always grated on my nerves. A few other guests chuckled uncomfortably, not fully understanding the context, but sensing the edge in her words. My mother, standing nearby with her own slice of cake, murmured, "Let it go." But I couldn't. In that moment, time seemed to slow as 7 years of financial sacrifices flashed through my mind. The $600 car repair that was never repaid. The $3,400 in medical bills when Tyler had pneumonia. The $20,000 down payment on their house. The $5,400 emergency roof repair. The $3,800 in mortgage payments during Greg's slow period. The $400 private school uniform. The $12,000 first semester tuition. The $12,000 second semester tuition I had paid just last week. Every check written, every bank transfer made, every credit card charge authorized, all while I delayed my own life goals. The condo I couldn't afford because my savings had been depleted. The vacation I'd canceled to cover their mortgage. The reduced retirement contributions that would affect my future security. And now, this public diminishment of my role in their lives, reduced to an open wallet, a financial resource to be tapped without acknowledgement or gratitude. My fingers tingled as blood rushed to my face. The cake plate felt suddenly heavy in my hands. Around me, conversations continued, but all I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears and the echo of Stephanie's words, "You're just the family wallet." With deliberate calm that belied the storm inside me, I set the untouched cake on the table. No one noticed at first as I walked across the room to the gift table, where envelopes containing checks and gift cards were propped against wrapped presents. I knew exactly which envelope I was looking for, the one I had brought as a backup, containing the confirmation of my tuition payment and a note about setting up automatic payments for the coming year. It was my real gift, beyond the telescope, financial security for Tyler's education. My fingers closed around the cream-colored envelope. As I turned, I found several pairs of eyes watching me curiously, including Stephanie's. "Everything okay, Allie?" she asked, a note of confusion in her voice. I held up the envelope. My voice, when it came, sounded distant even to my own ears. "Good luck covering next semester," I said clearly. "I just canceled the payment." The room went silent. Stephanie's smile froze on her face. Greg stopped mid-conversation. My mother's cake fork clattered against her plate. "What are you talking about?" Stephanie's voice had risen an octave. "I'm done being the family wallet," I said, surprised by how steady I sounded. Tyler deserves better than parents who mock the person funding his education. I turned and walked toward the front door, aware of the stunned silence behind me. Someone, one of the cousins, perhaps, whispered, "What just happened?" Stephanie's voice rose in panic. "Allison, stop. You can't be serious." Greg's heavier footsteps followed. "Come on, it was just a joke. Lighten up." I reached the front door and pulled it open, the May sunshine momentarily blinding me. Behind me, my mother called, "Allison, please don't do this today. It's Tyler's birthday." That nearly stopped me. Tyler, my innocent nephew caught in the middle of adult dysfunction. But then I remembered, this was about Tyler too. About teaching him that people shouldn't be valued merely for what they can provide materially. Without looking back, I walked to my rental car, slid into the driver's seat, and drove away from the party. In the rearview mirror, I could see Stephanie on the front lawn, Greg restraining her as she gesticulated wildly. Several party guests had spilled onto the porch, witnessing the family drama unfold. The first mile passed in a blur. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as adrenaline coursed through my system. Had I really just done that? Had I actually walked out of my nephew's birthday party after publicly announcing I was cutting off financial support? By the third mile, my phone was buzzing incessantly. Stephanie's name flashed on the screen again and again, interspersed with calls from my mother. I silenced the ringer without answering. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, eventually finding myself at a small park overlooking a lake. Sitting on a bench, I finally allowed the emotions to wash over me: anger, guilt, relief, sadness, even a surprising sense of liberation. When I finally checked my phone, I had 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Stephanie's texts ranged from furious, "How could you embarrass US like that?" to desperate, "Please call me, we need to talk about this." My mother's were more measured, but equally urgent. "Call me. We can fix this." But the message that broke my heart was from Tyler, sent from Stephanie's phone. "Aunt Allie, why are you mad? Don't you love me anymore?" That night in my hotel room, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I had just destroyed my relationship with my only nephew. But deeper than that fear was the certainty that something had to change. The pattern of financial exploitation had to end, even if it meant temporary pain for everyone involved. I had been an enabler for 7 years. Today, I had finally said enough. By Sunday morning, my phone had nearly exploded with notifications. Stephanie had called 23 times and sent 47 increasingly frantic text messages. "Answer your damn phone. You can't just drop a bomb like that and disappear. The school needs payment by Friday or they'll give away a spot. How could you do this to Tyler? He's just a kid." Mom is beside herself. "Are you happy now? Please, Allie. We need to talk about this. We can't afford this school without you, and you know it." My mother had called 12 times, her voicemails progressively more strained. "Allison, I understand you're upset, but this isn't the way to handle it. Please call Stephanie. She's falling apart. Tyler was crying after you left. He thinks you don't love him anymore. Families shouldn't do this to each other." The most surprising communication came from Greg, first an angry, slurred voicemail around midnight. "You think you're so much better than us with your fancy job," followed by a stiffly formal text the next morning. "Allison, I apologize for my message last night. I had been drinking. We should discuss this situation like adults. Please call when you're ready." I checked out of the hotel and drove straight to the airport, changing my flight to the earliest available departure. By Sunday afternoon, I was back in my Boston apartment, the familiar surroundings offering little comfort. On Monday morning, I called my boss at Tech Fusion. "Janet, I need to take some personal time." I explained that a family situation required my attention, intentionally vague on details. "Take the week," she said without hesitation. "Your projects are ahead of schedule anyway." With work handled, I faced the harder task, responding to my family. I texted Tyler first, knowing he was the innocent party in all this. "I love you very much, buddy. I'm not mad at you at all. This is grown-up stuff between me and your mom and dad. I'll always be your Aunt Allie." To my mother, I sent, "I'm safe in Boston. I need some space to think. I'll call when I'm ready." To Greg's surprising apology, I didn't respond at all. To Stephanie's barrage, I sent a single message, "I'm not discussing this via text. I'll call when I'm ready to talk." Her immediate response, When will that be? The school needs an answer. I turned off notifications and spent the day in uncommon silence, realizing how much of my mental energy had been consumed by my sister's constant crises. On Wednesday, I finally called Stephanie. She answered on the first ring. "Oh, thank God," she breathed. "Allie, you have to fix this." The school called again yesterday. "Stop," I interrupted firmly. "If the first thing you want to discuss is money, this conversation is over." "What do you want me to say?" Tears filled her voice. "That you humiliated us in front of everyone? That Tyler's been asking questions I can't answer? That Mom hasn't slept in days? I want you to acknowledge that you've been taking advantage of me for years," I said quietly. "I want you to understand that calling me the family wallet hurt more than you can imagine. It was a joke," she insisted. "You know how Greg and I tease each other. I didn't think you'd be so sensitive." "It wasn't just the comment, Stephanie. It's been building for years. I've given you over $90,000. The line went silent for a moment. "It hasn't been that much," she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. I checked my records before calling. $93,000 for $100 over 7 years. Not including gifts, not including flying out for visits. Just direct financial support. We've been struggling. You know how inconsistent Greg's work is." What were we supposed to do? Live within your means? Not buy new furniture while asking me to pay Tyler's tuition? Not landscape your yard while I cover your mortgage? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "Do you know what I've given up to support your family? The condo I couldn't buy? The retirement savings I've delayed." "So this is about money," she said accusingly. "I thought family helped family. Isn't that what Mom always taught us? This isn't about the money itself. It's about appreciation, recognition, not being treated like an ATM with endless funds and no feelings. We appreciate you. Tyler adores you. When's the last time you said thank you without immediately asking for something else? When's the last time you asked about my life, my work, my relationships? When's the last time you acknowledged any sacrifice I've made?" The silence that followed told me everything. "I can't do this anymore, Steph. I love you. I love Tyler. But this dynamic is destroying our relationship. So you're just cutting us off? Just like that?" Her voice had turned cold. "What about Tyler's education? Are you punishing him for something I said?" The guilt trip was so predictable it almost made me laugh. "Tyler will be fine. Plenty of kids get excellent educations at public schools. I did. It's not the same. His private school has specialized programs, smaller classes. Then you and Greg need to figure out how to pay for it." She began to cry in earnest then, heavy sobs that reminded me of when we were kids and she'd been denied something she wanted. "We can't afford it. You know we can't." "That's not my responsibility," I said gently. "It never should have been." The conversation circled painfully for another 20 minutes before ending with Stephanie hanging up on me. I sat in my quiet apartment, emotionally drained but strangely peaceful. That Friday, my cousin Rachel called. "Holy shit, Allie," she said without preamble. "The family group chat is on fire. What exactly happened at Tyler's party?" I gave her the abbreviated version. To my surprise, she laughed. "It's about time. Stephanie's been bleeding you dry for years. Diana and I have talked about it forever, but we didn't know how to bring it up with you." Hearing that other family members had noticed the pattern was oddly validating. "Mom thinks I'm being cruel. Aunt Barbara enables Stephanie just like you did," Rachel said bluntly. "Always has." Throughout the following weeks, family lines were clearly drawn. My mother called daily, alternating between guilt trips and tentative acknowledgments that perhaps the situation had gotten out of hand. My father, with whom I maintained a cordial but distant relationship, surprised me by calling to say he was proud of me for standing up for myself. The most unexpected development came when Tyler called from his friend's phone. "Aunt Allie? Are you still mad at us?" His innocent question broke my heart. "No, buddy. I was never mad at you. Mom says I might have to change schools because you don't want to help anymore. I closed my eyes, imagining his confused expression. That's not exactly right. I've helped your mom and dad with a lot of money for a long time, and sometimes grown-ups need to make changes so relationships stay healthy. Like when I had to stop letting Dexter copy my homework because he never did his own work. I smiled at his simple but accurate analogy. Exactly like that. I think I understand. Mom's been crying a lot. Dad's been looking at job websites. Things will get better, I promised. And no matter what, I'm still your aunt, and I still love you. Can we still go stargazing with my telescope sometime? Absolutely. By the end of the month, I had started seeing Dr. Morgan, a therapist specializing in family dynamics. In our first session, I broke down describing the birthday party incident. It sounds like you reached your breaking point, Dr. Morgan observed. These patterns usually collapse eventually. I feel guilty about Tyler. That's natural. But consider this. What example were you setting by allowing yourself to be exploited? What lessons was Tyler learning about relationships? That question haunted me for days afterward. What had Tyler been learning from watching his parents treat me like a resource rather than a person? That relationships were transactional? That some people existed merely to provide for others? Perhaps my boundary setting, though painful, was actually the healthier example he needed to see. The summer stretched before me like uncharted territory. For the first time in years, I didn't plan my vacation around visiting Stephanie's family. I didn't budget for emergency funds that might be needed for their latest crisis. I didn't check my phone constantly for texts beginning with "hate to ask," but the freedom was simultaneously exhilarating and disorienting. 2 weeks after the birthday party incident, I met my friend Jenna for dinner at our favorite Thai restaurant. I realized with a pang of guilt that I hadn't seen her in nearly 3 months, despite her living just across town. The prodigal friend returns, Jenna teased as I slid into the booth. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten me. I've been preoccupied, I admitted, then found myself pouring out the entire story between bites of pad thai. Jenna listened attentively, her expression shifting from surprise to outrage to satisfaction. I've been watching this happen for years, she said when I finished. Remember when you couldn't come to my 40th birthday trip because Stephanie needed help with Tyler's summer camp deposit? I winced, recalling the missed weekend in Nantucket. I'm sorry I've been so absent. Don't apologize to me, Jenna said firmly. Apologize to yourself for all the experiences you've missed while subsidizing your sister's lifestyle. That conversation sparked a painful inventory of what I'd sacrificed beyond money. Friendships had withered from neglect. My dating life had stalled, partly from being too busy with work and family obligations, partly from the financial strain of supporting 2 households. My own dreams had been indefinitely deferred while I helped fund someone else's. The following weekend, I called Heather, another friend I'd neglected. We spent Sunday hiking the trails at Middlesex Fells Reservation, catching up on months of missed connections. When she invited me to join her photography class, I surprised myself by agreeing immediately instead of my usual, "let me check my schedule," which really meant, "let me make sure there's no pending crisis with Stephanie." Dr. Morgan suggested I join a support group for emotional caretakers, people who habitually put others' needs before their own. In my first meeting, I listened to stories so similar to mine it was uncanny. The guilt, the manipulation, the exhaustion of being everyone's safety net. I realized I wasn't actually helping my brother by constantly rescuing him, said Kevin, a soft-spoken man in his 40s. I was keeping him stuck in a cycle of dependence. My mother still calls me selfish for setting boundaries, shared Lucia, a woman who could have been Stephanie's twin in her mannerisms. But for the first time in my life, I'm pursuing my own dreams without apology. Their stories reinforced what Dr. Morgan had been telling me. Healthy relationships require boundaries. Genuine love doesn't exploit. Supporting others shouldn't mean erasing yourself. In late June, I faced a task I'd been avoiding, calculating exactly how much financial support I'd provided to Stephanie's family. Sitting at my kitchen table with bank statements, spreadsheets, and a glass of wine, I documented every transfer, every check, every emergency payment. The final tally made me physically ill. $93,400 over 7 years. With that amount, I could have made a substantial down payment on a Boston condo. I could have maxed out my retirement contributions every year. I could have taken a sabbatical to travel. I could have funded my own dreams instead of someone else's. That night, I cried myself to sleep, not from anger at Stephanie, but from mourning the opportunities I'd surrendered without fully understanding the cost. July brought another unexpected development. I matched with Michael on a dating app, a software architect with kind eyes and a passion for kayaking. On our first date, when he asked about my family, I gave an abbreviated version of recent events. Instead of the awkward sympathy I expected, he nodded with understanding. My brother was the same way. Took me years to realize I wasn't helping him by being his personal bank. There was something powerfully connecting about finding someone who understood that specific struggle without judgment. Our second date stretched to 5 hours as conversation flowed effortlessly. By our fifth date, I realized I was beginning to develop real feelings for him, feelings uncompromised by financial stress or family obligation. Meanwhile, my relationship with Tyler evolved in unexpected ways. With Stephanie's reluctant permission, I began taking him on monthly outings, just the two of us. We visited the Museum of Science, went stargazing with his telescope at a local conservation area, and spent an afternoon at a coding workshop for kids. During these outings, I noticed subtle changes in how he related to me. Without presents or money as the centerpiece of our interaction, he engaged more genuinely. He asked questions about my work, remembered details from our previous conversations, and seemed to value our time together in a new way. Mom says we can't afford the space camp I wanted to go to, he confided during our August outing, watching me carefully for a reaction. I nodded, maintaining a neutral expression. That must be disappointing. She said maybe you would pay for it. His directness was both heartbreaking and illuminating. Tyler, I love spending time with you and teaching you things. But I won't be paying for extra activities anymore. That's something for your parents to figure out. He considered this, kicking at pebbles on the path. Dad's working more now. He got a second job. That shows he cares about providing for your family. Mom cried when she had to return her new purse. She said it was your fault. I took a deep breath. Adults sometimes blame others when they're upset about consequences of their own choices. Your mom and dad made choices about money that didn't work out, and now they're making different choices. That's actually a good thing. He seemed to absorb this, his expression thoughtful beyond his years. I got into the advanced math group at school, he offered, changing the subject. The public school has a special program too. That's fantastic. My pride was genuine. I always knew you were a math whiz. In September, I moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood, a symbolic fresh start. The rent was actually lower than my previous place, part of my new commitment to financial mindfulness. I'd begun working with a financial planner to rebuild my savings and create a realistic timeline for buying my own home. Michael helped me move, his steady presence a reminder of how a healthy relationship should feel, balanced, supportive, mutually beneficial. When he kissed me amid the half-unpacked boxes of my new living room, I felt a hopeful flutter that had nothing to do with money or obligation. Stephanie's communication had evolved from daily bombardment to weekly status reports, oscillating between cold formality and desperate appeals. Tyler had started public school. Greg had taken a second job at a hardware store on weekends. They were managing, though just barely, according to her. We had to cancel our cable, she reported with martyred pride. And Tyler can't do travel soccer this year. I offered genuine sympathy without offering money, a boundary that still felt strange, but necessary. My mother, to my surprise, began showing signs of growth as well. During our weekly calls, she stopped pushing for reconciliation and started asking more questions about my life, my work, my new relationship. "I've been thinking about how we handled money after the divorce," she admitted during one particularly honest conversation. "I may have leaned on you too much, expected you to be stronger than you should have had to be at 16. "You did your best," I assured her, touched by this rare acknowledgement. "Still," she said, "I wonder if that set up patterns for you and Stephanie. Me relying on you, you relying on her." It was the most insightful observation she'd ever made about our family dynamics. Dr. Morgan says patterns repeat until someone consciously breaks them. "You broke it," my mother said softly. "It hurt everyone, including you, but you broke it." For Thanksgiving, I declined the invitation to join family in Chicago, choosing instead to host a Friendsgiving in my new apartment. Jenna, Heather, Michael, and several colleagues gathered around my table, filling my home with laughter and uncomplicated joy. As I looked around at these people who valued me for myself, not my financial contributions, I realized I was healing. The guilt still surfaced occasionally, but it no longer controlled my decisions. The anger had mostly dissolved, replaced by a calm determination to create healthier relationships moving forward. That evening, after everyone had left and Michael was helping me wash the last dishes, my phone rang with a FaceTime call from Tyler. "Aunt Allie, I wanted to show you the science fair project I'm working on." His face was alight with excitement as he turned his phone to display a half-built model of the solar system. In the background, I caught a glimpse of Stephanie watching with an unreadable expression. Our eyes met briefly through the screen, hers tired but no longer hostile, mine steady and unregretful. Some bridges were being rebuilt, slowly and with better foundations. Others might remain damaged beyond repair. But for the first time since that fateful birthday party 6 months earlier, I felt confident that I'd made the right choice, not just for my financial health, but for the authenticity of all my relationships going forward. The December chill had settled over Boston when I received a thick envelope in the mail with Stephanie's handwriting on the address label. Inside was a 5-page handwritten letter, not an email, not a text, but an actual letter on stationery, something so unusual for my technology-dependent sister that I sat down immediately to read it. "Dear Allison," it began. "I've started this letter a dozen times over the past weeks. Nothing sounds right. Nothing seems adequate. But I need to try anyway." What followed was the most honest communication I'd received from my sister in our adult lives. She acknowledged the pattern of financial dependence, admitted to taking advantage of my generosity, and expressed genuine remorse for the hurt she'd caused. "The comment about you being the family wallet haunts me," she wrote. "I said it without thinking, the way I say so many thoughtless things. But looking back, I can see it revealed how I've been treating you, as a resource rather than my sister, whom I love deeply." She detailed the harsh realities they'd faced since I'd withdrawn my support, selling their second car, Greg picking up weekend shifts at a hardware store, Tyler adjusting to public school. But rather than framing these as accusations, she presented them as necessary corrections. "We should have been living this way all along," she admitted. "We were spending money we didn't have because we knew you would cover the shortfalls. That wasn't fair to you, and it wasn't teaching Tyler good values." The letter ended with a request, not for money, but for a chance to talk in person. "I'm not asking for financial help. I'm asking for a chance to begin rebuilding our relationship, the real one, not the unhealthy dynamic we fell into. I miss my sister." I read the letter 3 times, emotions swirling. Dr. Morgan had warned me about the cycle of abuse and reconciliation, how the genuine remorse shown during apologies often gave way to repeated patterns once forgiveness was granted. But something about the letter felt different from Stephanie's previous manipulations. After discussing it in therapy, I decided to take a cautious step forward. I texted Stephanie suggesting a video call the following weekend. Her response was immediate. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Our first conversation was awkward, halting, filled with long pauses and careful phrasing. She looked different, her highlighted hair now showing dark roots, her previously manicured nails now short and unpolished. These weren't calculated details to earn sympathy. They were simply evidence of adjusted priorities. "Tyler's doing really well in public school," she said, surprising me by leading with positive news rather than complaints. "His math teacher says he's performing 2 grades above level." "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. He mentioned the advanced program during our last outing. "Those days with you mean everything to him." Her voice caught. To be honest, I was jealous at first that you could still have a relationship with him while I was dealing with the fallout. But he comes home from your outings so excited, so engaged. It made me realize what really matters. We talked for nearly 2 hours, carefully navigating around tender spots while acknowledging the elephant in the room. No, I would not resume financial support. Yes, I still love them. No, things couldn't go back to how they were before. Yes, I was open to building something new. In January, I agreed to meet for coffee during my next trip to Chicago. The cafe we chose was modest, a far cry from the upscale establishments Stephanie had preferred in the past. She arrived before me, already seated with 2 steaming mugs. "I wasn't sure if you still take your coffee black," she said as I slid into the booth. "Some things never change," I replied, accepting the mug gratefully. The conversation flowed more easily in person, though undercurrents of tension remained. She mentioned Greg's reluctance to accept our new dynamic. "He thinks I should be angrier with you," she admitted. "He says you abandoned us when we needed you most." "What do you think?" I asked, watching her face carefully. She considered the question seriously. "I think we took advantage of your love for so long that we mistook it for obligation. When you finally said no, it felt like abandonment because we'd come to depend on something we had no right to expect." Her insight surprised me. "That's remarkably self-aware." "Therapy," she said with a small smile. "Turns out I needed it as much as you did." The revelation that Stephanie had begun seeing a therapist was perhaps the strongest evidence of genuine change. My sister, who had always dismissed psychological support as paying someone to listen to you complain, was doing the difficult work of self-examination. In February, Greg reached out directly for the first time since his awkward apology text. His email was stiff but respectful, acknowledging his part in the unhealthy dynamic and his initial resentment at the changes I'd forced. "Your sister and I are working on our marriage," he wrote. "Financial stress has always been our biggest issue, but we've never addressed it honestly until now. I'm not asking for your forgiveness yet, but I want you to know I'm trying to be better, as a husband, as a father, and eventually, hopefully, as your brother-in-law." Meanwhile, Tyler continued to adapt with the resilience of childhood. During our monthly outings, he spoke enthusiastically about his public school's science Olympiad team and his new friends in the neighborhood. "Dad's teaching me about budgeting," he told me proudly during our March visit to a robotics exhibition. "I get an allowance now, but I have to save half of it. I'm saving for a new bike." "That's a great skill to learn," I said, noting how financial education had never been part of his life when money seemed to magically appear whenever needed. "Mom says we have to be careful with money now, but she says it's actually better this way." He looked at me with those innocent eyes. "She says we're more honest now." By April, I felt secure enough in our healing relationship to invite Stephanie and her family to join my mother for Easter dinner. I suggested a restaurant to neutral territory, but Stephanie countered with a surprising alternative. "Could we host at our house?" she asked. "Nothing fancy, just a simple meal. Tyler wants to show you his science fair ribbons, and it would mean a lot to try to make new memories there. Better ones." I agreed with some trepidation. Returning to the house where our relationship had imploded felt symbolically significant, but emotionally risky. The difference in their home was immediately apparent when I arrived. The expensive furniture had been replaced with more modest pieces. Family photos had taken the place of designer decor. The atmosphere felt warmer, more authentic, less like a showpiece. Greg greeted me with an awkward handshake that turned into an equally awkward side hug. "Thank you for coming," he said, and I could see the effort behind his words. Dinner was simple: a ham, roasted vegetables, rolls from a local bakery. No lavish spread designed to impress, just a family meal prepared with care. My mother watched the interactions with barely concealed amazement, witnessing a dynamic she'd never thought possible. After dessert, as my mother and Greg cleaned up in the kitchen, Stephanie and I stepped onto the back porch for a moment alone. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice steady. "I got a job." "You did? That's fantastic." "It's nothing fancy. Administrative work at Tyler's school. But it's 3 days a week, and it means we can cover his summer camp ourselves this year." She said this last part with quiet pride. "I'm happy for you, Steph." "Really? We sold a lot of things," she continued. "The designer purses, Greg's fancy tools he never used, my jewelry except for Mom's pieces. It turns out we had thousands of dollars tied up in stuff we didn't need, trying to look like we had money when we were actually drowning in debt. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. We're still struggling," she admitted. "But it's an honest struggle now. No secrets, no quick fixes, no magical sister to bail us out." "And how does that feel?" I asked gently. She looked out at the simplified backyard, where the elaborate playset had been sold and replaced with a simple swing hanging from the oak tree. "It feels real. Hard, but real." On Mother's Day, our family gathered at Barbara's hotel during her visit to Boston. The conversation flowed more naturally than it had in years, without the undercurrent of financial tension that had previously defined our interactions. When Tyler stepped away to explore the hotel lobby with Greg, my mother looked between Stephanie and me with tears in her eyes. "I never thought we'd get here," she confessed. "I was sure that birthday party had fractured our family permanently." "It nearly did," I acknowledged. "I enabled it," my mother said, taking responsibility in a way she never had before. "I saw what was happening but kept telling Allison to let it go instead of addressing the real problem." Stephanie reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "It took losing everything to realize what really mattered." "You didn't lose everything," I corrected gently. "You lost the financial cushion, but you gained self-sufficiency. And we're finding our way back to being real sisters." "Better sisters," Stephanie amended. "More honest than we've ever been." By Thanksgiving, I felt comfortable enough to bring Michael to family dinner in Chicago. Watching him interact with my family, the genuine version, not the facade maintained by my financial support, filled me with quiet joy. He and Greg discovered a shared interest in woodworking. Tyler bombarded him with questions about software architecture. Even Stephanie made a genuine effort to get to know the man who had become so important in my life. That evening, as everyone gathered in the living room for board games, I overheard Greg telling Michael, "She saved us, you know. Not with money, by stopping the money. We would have crashed eventually, but she forced us to face reality before we destroyed everything." Michael's response was quiet, but carried clearly to where I stood. She had to save herself first. That's not selfishness, it's survival. As the year anniversary of the birthday party incident approached, I realized how profoundly that moment had transformed all our lives. The initial pain had given way to something unexpected, a family relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence, authentic connection rather than obligation. Tyler's 11th birthday party was a modest affair at a local park, homemade cupcakes, a few school friends, simple games. I brought a set of science books he'd mentioned wanting, wrapped simply with a card expressing my genuine pride in the person he was becoming. When Stephanie handed me a cupcake, our eyes met with shared understanding of how far we'd come. No cutting remarks, no expectations, no underlying tension. Just a sister sharing dessert with a sister she was learning to appreciate for who she was, not what she could provide. "Thank you," she said quietly. not just for coming today, but for everything. I knew she meant the difficult gift of boundaries, the painful withdrawal that had ultimately led to healing. "We're going to be okay," I replied. And for the first time, I truly believed it. 1 year after walking out of Tyler's birthday party, I found myself standing in the same living room, surrounded by the same family, but in a fundamentally transformed relationship. The journey from family wallet to valued sister, from financial enabler to respected individual, had been painful but ultimately healing for everyone involved. My relationship with money had changed dramatically. Where one side viewed my financial resources primarily as a means to solve other people's problems, I now recognized the importance of my own security and goals. Working with a financial planner, I'd rebuilt my emergency fund, increased my retirement contributions, and was on track to purchase my own condo within the year. More importantly, I'd learned to separate generosity from exploitation. True generosity came from choice, not obligation, and was received with gratitude rather than entitlement. I still helped family when appropriate, contributing to a community fundraiser when Tyler's school music program faced budget cuts, for instance, but these were conscious choices rather than expected solutions to ongoing problems. Stephanie and Greg had undergone perhaps the most remarkable transformation. The financial reckoning that followed my withdrawal of support had forced them to completely restructure their lives. They had downsized in ways they'd once considered unthinkable, selling possessions, taking on additional work, cutting unnecessary expenses. Stephanie's part-time administrative job at Tyler's school had recently expanded to full-time with benefits, giving her a sense of purpose and contribution she'd never experienced before. "I actually like earning my own money," she admitted during a recent sister lunch. "There's a pride in it I never understood." Greg had developed a small woodworking business on weekends, crafting custom furniture that supplemented his construction income. The craftsmanship gave him a creative outlet and a sense of accomplishment that purely making money had never provided. Their marriage, once strained by financial deception and dependence on outside support, had grown stronger through honest struggle and shared responsibility. "We talk about money now," Stephanie explained. "Actually talk about it, not just ignore problems until they become emergencies someone else has to fix." Tyler, now 11, had weathered the changes with remarkable resilience. His transfer from private to public school had initially seemed like a step backward, but he thrived in the more diverse environment, developing stronger social skills and maintaining his academic excellence. The financial education he was receiving through watching his parents budget, save, and make careful choices would serve him far better than the entitled expectation that resources were unlimited. My mother, Barbara, had perhaps been the most surprising development. After decades of enabling Stephanie's financial dependence, she had begun examining her own role in our family dynamics. During a heart-to-heart conversation last month, she'd confessed, "I always favored Stephanie because she seemed to need more help. I never realized I was actually hurting both of you, her by not requiring responsibility, you by expecting too much." That acknowledgement had healed something deep within me that I hadn't even recognized needed healing. My relationship with Michael had blossomed in this healthier environment. Without the constant drain of family financial crises, I had emotional and financial resources to invest in building something meaningful. His steady presence and understanding of boundary issues had supported me through the most difficult transitions. Last week, when he'd surprised me with an engagement ring during a sunset kayaking trip, my immediate response hadn't been worry about affording a wedding or guilt about spending on myself. Instead, I'd felt pure joy at building a future with someone who valued me completely. The final piece of healing came, unexpectedly, during a quiet moment at Tyler's 11th birthday party. As families mingled in the park and children played tag between picnic tables, Stephanie approached me with 2 cups of lemonade. "Remember last year?" she asked, sitting beside me on a bench. "Hard to forget," I replied, accepting the drink. I was so angry when you walked out. I thought you were being cruel and selfish." She stared out at the children playing. "It took me months to understand you were actually being kind, not just to yourself, but to us." "I didn't feel very kind at the time," I admitted. "The financial dependence was destroying us from the inside out. We just couldn't see it because it was easier than facing reality." She turned to me, her expression sincere. "You know what Tyler said to me last week? He said he's glad we're not rich anymore because we do more things together now instead of just buying stuff." Tears pricked at my eyes. Kids understand more than we think. You were never just the family wallet, Allie. You were the family compass. You pointed us in the right direction when we'd gotten completely lost. That evening, as Michael and I drove back to our hotel, I reflected on everything that had changed in a year. The initial pain of confrontation had given way to a deeper, more authentic connection than I'd ever thought possible. By refusing to continue in an unhealthy pattern, I'd created space for genuine relationships to form. Financial support had masked the real issues in our family for years. Only by withdrawing that mask could we see each other clearly, flaws, strengths, and all the complicated humanity in between. We were still imperfect, still learning, still making mistakes. But we were doing it honestly now, with respect for each other's boundaries and appreciation for each other's worth beyond money. The hardest lesson I'd learned was sometimes walking away is the most loving thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for those who have come to depend on you in unhealthy ways. Real love sometimes means refusing to continue patterns that diminish both the giver and the receiver. Perhaps most importantly, I'd learned my own worth wasn't tied to what I could provide materially. I was valuable as a sister, an aunt, a daughter, a partner, not as a financial resource or problem solver. That knowledge had changed everything. So, what about you? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice that hurt in the moment but led to growth for everyone involved? Have you struggled with being valued for what you provide rather than who you are? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your stories of setting boundaries and finding your true worth. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you found this story meaningful. I share new experiences every week about family dynamics, personal growth, and finding your authentic path. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. Your support means more than you know. Until next time, remember that sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that bring the most healing.